We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Ches Amid Beis in Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 28b. And the previous Amid, the Gemara was dealing with a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Brisa in terms of whether we are concerned for death or not. The contradiction was relevant to the halachas of Truma. And Rava answers, Shema meis lo chayshinan. We're not concerned that someone died, meaning in the past tense, but Shema yomus chayshinan, but that somebody will die in the future tense, that we are concerned for. And Rashi explains, Shema meis lo chayshinan du'uk minon ha-chazaka shehinicho chai, because there's a chazaka, the person was alive. V'gabe kohen shehalach lemedinas hayam. So in the case of a kohen who goes far away, kevan shelo girsha, since he did not divorce her, eina neseres ela imkein meis. So she's only going to be prohibited from truma if he dies, and we have a presumption, again, Shema meis in the past tense, we do not have a presumption that he died, rather we assume that he is alive. Aval zusha nosein lo get, but in the case of the Brisa where the kohen gives her a get, al menas sheyochel sha'achas kodem lemisaso, on the condition that it is chal 1 moment or 1 hour before his death, so there l'shema yomos miyad vadei chayshinan, for the possibility that he might die immediately, that we are concerned. To lo mara lo lechazaka b'achi, because that's not contradicting the current chazaka, and so therefore that we are concerned for. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Ada bar Masna l'Rava. So Rav Ada bar Masna said to Rav of Hanod, but what about the case that we just brought before with the wine flask? The keshema yomasu, that is a future tense. Maybe he will die. In that case, maybe the node will break. Upliga, and yet there was a machlokis over there. And Rashi says, "V'hanod l'didach the bois l'ukme l'divrei hakol," meaning he's saying, according to you, Rava, that you want to understand that it's following all tanoim. This distinction follows all tanoim. V'hanod, but what about the case of the node, of the wine flask, the haida asri le lishtos? Because the reason why we forbid him to drink the wine from the wine flask, again, in that case, he wanted to use breira and say, whatever wine I select later will be truma, that will be truma, and what I select later for meiser, that will be meiser. And so we said that a bunch of tanoim said we can't do that. He's not allowed to do that, because of a concern maybe the wine flask will break. So in that case, Mishum Shema Yamasu, that again, that is going in the future. Upalag Rabbi Meir Vamar Lo Chayshinan, and in that case there's a machlokas tanoim. Some of the tanoim said we are concerned. Rabbi Meir said we're not concerned. And here we're saying everybody agrees that Shema Yamas Chayshinan, that in the future tense, everybody agrees that we are concerned. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Rav Yehuda midaskarta. Rav Yehuda midaskarta says, Shani node, it's different by a node, the efsher, the moser, leila shomer, because that you can prevent. It's possible to give it over to a shomer, someone who can protect it, and that's why in that particular case, Rabbi Meir does argue and says we are not concerned, even though in general, Shema Yomos Chayshinan. Maskeflar of Mesharshia asks, Arvach Arvatzarech, your guarantor needs a guarantor. How do we know that we can trust the shomer? Maybe we need a shomer to watch the shomer. Eloma Rava, rather Rava says, Shema Meis Lo Chayshinan. When it comes to maybe he already died in the past tense, that is something that we are not concerned about. But Shema Yomas, but maybe he will die. It's not that everyone agrees, but Tanoihi. That's a machlokas Tanoim in terms of Shema Yomas, as we see by the node. There is a machlokas Tanoim. Rashi says Shema Meis Lo Chayshinan, meaning Umasnis and Divrei Hakol. Our Mishnah follows everybody because that's Shema Meis. Everybody agrees Shema Meis Lo Chayshinan. We're not concerned that the Kohen already died. Ubraisa Daharei Gitach, but the Braisa where he says this is your get Shah Achas, 1 moment before I die. So that's Tanoi. That's going to be a machlokas Tanoim, meaning Pluksa Rabbi Meir v'Chaver. That would be a machlokas Rabbi Meir and his colleagues, whether or not we are concerned with Shema Yamus. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah had a case, Hashaleach Chatosom Medinas Hayom v'chulu, somebody who sends his korban chatos from Medinas Hayom. And again, the Mishnah said there also, we're not concerned that the owner has died. And the Gemara says, V'habayino smicha, but don't we need smicha? He has to rest his hands on the korban. So how could he send it Medinas Hayom? Rashi says, V'habayino smicha v'tanya v'toras kohanim yodo, it has to be his hand. V'lo yad beno, not his son's hands. Yodo v'lo yad shlucho, it has to be his hand, and not his shliach's hand. So how does this work? Amar Rav Yosef says, Bekarban Nashim, we're talking about a korban of women. Rashi says, Bekarban Nashim, Isha Shashagaga Bekares V'shalcha Chatasa, Degabe Smicha Tanya Daber El B'nei Yisrael. We're talking about a woman who did an Avera that was a level of Kares, a Kares level Avera. She did it by mistake, so she sends her korban Chatas, and by Smicha it says, B'nei Yisrael V'samach, B'nei Yisrael Samchin V'ein B'nos Yisrael Samchos. We learn from there that B'nei Yisrael, they're the ones who do Smicha and not the B'nos Yisrael, so there's no Smicha by women, and that's how we can understand our Mishnah. Rav Papa says, Bechatas ha'of, we're talking about a carbon chatas that is a bird carbon chatas. By a bird carbon chatas, there is no smicha. And the Gemara says, Utzricha, we need all the cases in the Mishnah. Rashi says, Utzricha lemisni tlosa bavi b'masnisin b'chezka shukayim. There are 3 cases in the Mishnah, and all 3 essentially say the same halacha, that we assume the person is still alive. We need all 3 cases. Di'ashmin and get, because if we only have the case of get, mishum de lo efshar, because there is no other option. You're going to have a situation of iguna over there. If you're going to assume the person dies, you're never going to have a person who's going to be able to send a get. Avol truma de efshar, but by truma there are other possibilities. You don't have to eat truma; you could eat something else. So eimalos, I would say over there, maybe not. Maybe there we would be concerned for death. V'yashmin and truma. If we only had the case of truma, the zimnin de lo efshar. Sometimes it is impossible by truma. Maybe there only is truma available. Avol chatas ha'of, but when it comes to the carbon chatas, misveika lo leo chulin lazor. So there you have a doubt over here: is the person alive? Is the person dead? Maybe out of a doubt we shouldn't bring a carbon, because maybe it's like bringing chulin to the azar. It's like bringing a carbon that's actually not a carbon, it's chulin, and that would be a problem. And so tzricha, that's why we need all of these cases. Rashi says the zimnin de lo efshar. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you need to have the truma. Shianiya, maybe she's poor. Utzricha parnasa, she needs parnasa. V'titol truma bebeis hagranas, and so she takes from the truma, and that's why by truma it is possible that it's lo efshar. Maybe there is no alternative rather than having truma. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Shlosha devarim Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Prata lefnei Chachamim. There were 3 things that Rabbi Elazar ben Prata said before the Chachamim. V'kaimu es devarav, and they upheld his words. Al ir sheikifa karkom, on a city that's surrounded by a siege. Ve'al asfina hamutrefes bayam, in a ship that is out at sea. Ve'al hayotze lidon, and if somebody's going out to be judged in a capital case. She'ein bechezkas kayam, and in all these cases there's a presumption that the individual or the individuals are alive. Avalir shekavsha karkom, but if you have a city that was conquered by besiegers, usfina she'avda bayam, or if you have a ship that is lost at sea, vayotze leharg, or somebody that's going out, he's being taken out by the court to be killed. Nosnen alein chumrei chayim v'chumrei mesim. So then we apply stringencies as if he was alive and stringencies as if he was dead, meaning to say we apply stringencies in both directions as follows. Bas Yisrael a Kohen, let's say you have a Bas Yisrael married to a Kohen, and now you have to apply the stringency to the Kohen, or the stringency rather to the Bas Yisrael. Bas Kohen li Yisrael, let's say a Bas Kohen is married to Yisrael, then you have to again apply the stringency to the Bas Kohen. Lo tocha b'truma. The stringency is that in both cases she's not allowed to eat truma, meaning to say if you have a Bas Yisrael that's married to a Kohen, so while the Kohen is alive she can have truma, but we apply the stringency and we say that maybe the Kohen is dead, so the Bas Yisrael cannot have truma. And the other way around by a Bas Kohen li Yisrael, if a Bas Kohen is married to Yisrael, she cannot have truma, and so we have to assume over here that the Yisrael is still alive, and therefore she cannot have truma. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, Lo shanu ella bebezin shal Yisrael. What was taught at the end of the Mishnah is only talking about in a Jewish court, meaning if you have a situation where a person is being taken out to be killed in a Jewish court, so then we say we apply the stringencies as if he has died, and also the stringencies as if he's alive, because it's possible that they would go back on the ruling and the person would not actually be killed in a Jewish court. But if it is a non-Jewish court, once it's ruled and he's being taken out to be killed, miktal katlile, they surely will kill him, and therefore we don't have to apply any of the stringencies as if he was alive. We can assume that he is surely dead. Rashi says, again, we did not teach at the end of the Mishnah that someone being taken out to be killed, that we give him the stringencies as if he might be alive. That's only true in a bezin shel Yisrael. So even after they have the final ruling, sometimes they find the merit and they retract the ruling. So again, that's only by a Jewish court, but by a non-Jewish court, we can assume that the person is actually dead. Amar le Abayis, so Abayis said to Rav Yosef, Bezin shalov dekochavim nami, in a Bezin and a non-Jewish Bezin as well, the Makabli Shochta, maybe they did take back the ruling because they accepted bribes, and so maybe they took a bribe, and therefore they retracted the ruling. Amar le, so he said to him, Kishakli Makami delichtum porsi shinmeg. The only time that they take bribes is before the actual verdict is sealed. Levasr demichtam porsi shinmeg lo shakli. But once the verdict is sealed, at that point in time, they no longer take bribes, and so therefore again, in the Bezin Shalov Dekochavim, we can assume with certainty that the person is dead. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have the following question, Kal makom sheyamdu shnayim, v'yomru mi'idin onu es ish ploni shenigmar dino, bebez dino shel ploni uploni Ploni Uploni Edav. Anytime two people get up and they say, we testify that a certain person had Gemara Din in a particular bezin, and these were the Edim, Hareze Yeharik. So we accept their testimony, and there was a ruling over there in that other court that this person should be killed, and so therefore this person is put to death. And so you see from this Mishnah in Makos that we assume once there was a ruling, it's not going to be retracted. And the Gemara says to that, Dilma maybe Boreach Shani, when he's running away, so maybe that's different. In a situation where he's fleeing from the court, we're not going to retract the ruling. Rashi says, Kol makom reisha hacha isa misha nigmar dino ubarach. The reisha of the Mishnah is somebody had a Gemara din and he ran away. Beparakama de Makos, this is in the first parak of Makos. Hareze yeharig, he gets killed. Alma lo amrin and shem so lo zechus acharechen. So we see that we don't say maybe they found some merit afterwards and they retracted the din. Shmami no lo shchicha, so you see it's not common. V'lo mesafkinan b'hachi, and it's not something that we should be in doubt about. And therefore we see from here that in a Jewish court, on the contrary, once it's ruled that he should be killed and he's being taken out to be killed, it's not something that's going to be retracted. And again, the Gemara then responded that maybe Boreach Hashani when he's running away, so in that situation it's not going to be retracted, but in other situations maybe they would find the zechus and they would retract the ruling. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, the following proof, Shama mi bezin shal Yisrael shal yuomrim ish ploni meis, if he heard from a Jewish court that they were saying that so-and-so died, or ish ploni narag, or so-and-so was killed, yasiu es ishto, that is enough evidence to say that his wife is allowed to get married. We can assume that this individual died. But let's say he hears from the people who are supposed to carry out the death penalties in the non-Jewish courts, and he hears the person say, Ish ploni meis, Ish ploni nerek, so-and-so died, so-and-so was killed, al yasiu es ishto. So in that situation, his wife is not allowed to get remarried. It's possible that the person is still alive. And the Gemara now says, my meis my nereg. Now what does it mean that they heard that he died or that he was killed? Ilema meis mamish v'nereg nereg mamish. If it means to say that they heard that he actually died, they heard that he was actually killed. In other words, the Brisa is saying, if you heard from a Jewish court that the person died, so then you can assume he's dead. But if you heard from a non-Jewish court that the person died, so then you cannot assume he's dead. But that doesn't make sense. In the similar case by the non-Jewish court, why would his wife not be able to get married? But we've established that any time even the non-Jews, if they're just talking in conversation, they don't realize that what they are saying is serving as evidence. So we actually trust what they're saying. We believe what they're saying. And so therefore, even in the case of the non-Jewish court, we should say that his wife is allowed to remarry. And so the Gemara says, Elalav, rather is it not, Meis Yotze Lomos Nerag Yotze Liharig. When it says in the Brisa Meis, it doesn't mean that he heard that the person actually died. It means that he heard that the person was going out to die. When he heard in the court that the person was killed, it doesn't mean he was actually killed. It means he heard that he was going out to be killed. And what does it say in this Brisa? The Katani, and it says in this Brisa, Bebezdin Yisrael, in a Jewish court, if he heard this in a Jewish court, Yasiu es ishtos, and then they can tell the wife that she's allowed to remarry, meaning we know with certainty that the person has died. We don't say that it's a suffix. We don't say we apply the stringencies. And so you see that in the Jewish court, it is a certainty. It is not considered a suffix whether this individual has died. And so the Gemara says, Liola meis mamish v'nereg mamish. Really what this brisa means is it means that he heard in the court that he actually died, he was actually killed. And that which you asked, that in the similar case by a non-Jewish court, Amailo, so why don't we believe it? Why don't we say that he has died? Because it's Mesiach lefitumo, v'akaimelon dechol Mesiach lefitumo, heimune mehemni. But haven't we established that anytime you have Mesiach lefitumo, that you hear the non-Jew in conversation, he's believed? But hanimili b'milzu d'lo shaychi, but that's only by something that has no relevance. If you hear the non-Jew in conversation about something that's irrelevant to the non-Jew, so then you can trust it. But if it's something that's relevant, like over here, in this case, they want to take pride in the fact that they carried out the death penalty, so avdi lechzuke shekrayev, so they're going to do that, they'll want to strengthen their lie, and so therefore, in this case, you cannot trust them, even though it's Mesiach lefitumo, but you can't trust them in this situation in the non-Jewish courts. And Rashi explains, Ish ploni meis bebezdin misas atzma. When it says so-and-so died, it means he died in the court on his own death. Kagon mishaloka v'shana bebezdin kosono solakipa. For example, the person who was hit with lashes in bezdin repeatedly and he was locked up. So if you heard again that the person had died, or nerag, that he was killed, echad meyarba misos, one of the 4 death penalties, v'gabe ovde kochavim meis kemo lekmunya chalila diktia bar shalom b'mesachas avodah zarah. And this refers to stories in Meseches avodah zarah of individuals who were killed by the non-Jewish government. And Rashi continues, Kuman Terisin Mamun Leharig. Again, these are people that are appointed by the court to carry out the death penalty. Amai Al Yasi Wishtu. And then the Gemara said, why shouldn't the wife be allowed to remarry if you hear from the non-Jewish court that the individual died? Hakaimalam Beperk Basra the Yivamas over Kochav Mesiach Lefitumo Kosher Leidasisha. We've established in Meseches Yivamas that if a non-Jew is talking in conversation, that's considered kosher in terms of testimony that a woman would be kosher for. V'katani Gabi Yisrael Yasiu V'kasher Rav Yosef. And then the Gemara says, what does it say by the Jewish courts? It says that the wife is allowed to remarry. That's a question on Rav Yosef, because we see by the Jewish courts it's considered a certainty. And then the Gemara says, no, what we're talking about over here is, again, what you hear from the Jewish courts, not that they're being taken out to be killed, but they've actually been killed, they've actually died. The Lo Shaychi. So then the Gemara said, well, if that's the case, why don't we believe it by the non-Jewish courts? And the Gemara said, by Mesiach Lefituma, we only believe the non-Jews if it's something that's not relevant to them. Sheina Tefereslam, it's not something that they're going to take pride in. But the Shaychi, but if it's something they're going to take pride in, here they're taking pride in the fact that they carried out this justice. So Avida L'Shakar, sometimes they will lie. Velomer Nereg, they'll say the person was killed. Even though they didn't see anything, they didn't see that he was killed, they only saw him go out to judgment, but still they are going to lie in this situation. And the Gemara continues, Zika Diamri, there are those that say, and this is a different version of Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef says, Lo Shana, we only learned at the end of the Mishnah that we're strict and we say that the person has to be treated as if he is dead and as if he is alive. We give both stringencies. Ella bebezin shalov de kochavim. That's only in the court of the non-Jews. In the court of the non-Jews, if he's being taken out to be killed, we have to apply the stringencies that maybe he's dead and maybe he's alive. Rashi says, Lo shana denos and olav chumrei chayim. We only say that we treat him with stringencies that he might be alive. Ella bedinei of de kochavim the shakli shochta. That's only by the non-Jewish courts where they take bribes. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph.